All right, Michele.
So similar to our early morning speaker, Ying Ma, I'm an American dream story. Grew up as only child of a single mom who didn't have a college education, but through a lot of hard work and education, been able to change my stars, which is wonderful because you can do that in America. So I did grow up here, and I've moved and lived different places around the country. And despite my circumstances that I grew up in, I had a lot. I was very fortunate to have mentors and teachers who looked past that, who saw the potential and encouraged me. So having no one technical in my family, but being someone very fascinated with space and hoping to travel there someday, I decided to go in. I was encouraged by my physics teacher in high school, started in physics, and then all of my study buddies were electrical engineers. So being a glutton for punishment, I added on a double major in physics and engineering science and graduated with honors in 4 years. And then decided, what do I want to do after that? And optics seemed up and coming, and at the time, people looked at you and went, optics? Well, I guess we need more people to make eyeglasses. Now, you all laugh because you know better of all the amazing things you can do with optics. So I went on to grad school, and I kept thinking I applied for the astronaut program and then soon found out if you weren't a fighter pilot or a PhD, you weren't going to make it in. But then I got recruited into America's other space program, National Security Space. And that's how I ended up spending over 20 years in the national security community, still carry a clearance, still work in that business, but I've moved on and into other things. So just seeing, we talked about integrity and character, and I had an opportunity as an engineer, and I joked that I had great job security because being an engineer with communication and social skills is a bonus because, a lot of engineers don't have that. And so I had an opportunity to really expand my influence, starting out as a system engineer, but seeing things that needed to be done and kind of branching out. I branched out into IT. I also became a trusted advisor to very senior leadership, as some of the other speakers have talked about, as being someone of integrity, someone who's going to tell you exactly like they see it, and being there and being the assistant to help out the senior leader. It is lonely at the top, and I have been close friends with some very, 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 very senior government officials. And knowing that they knew that they could call me and say, what do you think? And that I cared about their success and I cared about the mission, gave me amazing opportunities to have a positive influence, but even from the background. And so post 9/11, I was one of those people who was, an innovator and proposing new things, crazy things like collaborative environments where we could do information sharing in real time. And this was back in the, in the late 90s, and the web was still kind of new, and the intelligence community is very siloed. And they didn't communicate with each other, as you know, because we failed to connect the dots with 9/11. And so all of a sudden, people who were branded heretics like me became very much of interest by the senior leadership of what were those things you were talking about and those capabilities, because we failed and we need to think differently. And so they said, would you come into the government and help lead this change and innovation? But I have to tell you, before that wasn't an easy ride. I was threatened with my job. I was threatened with my clearances if I literally, quote, dared to breathe the word collaboration. And this was post 9/11. And so I had some really low points, but I knew, I believed in what I was doing. I believed it needed to be done, that I was a voice for people who didn't have a seat at the table but were in harm's way. And having the courage of my convictions, from going to nearly losing my job entirely to being asked by the man who's now our Director of National Intelligence to come into the government and help him lead change with the Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And so the day before my 33rd birthday, and not many people know this, I was standing on the beach in San Diego because I was on travel, facing the flag of the Hotel de Coronado, being sworn in as a senior executive, which is a general and flag officer equivalent in the military. And so I was very young to serve at that level. But I tell you, you're never too young to lead. And you look at history, whether it's, in history throughout, the biblical times, or even in our nation, there was people who were young, but they had the leadership skills the country needed at the time, and they had that opportunity. So I came in and got to serve also as a technologist who had been in the front lines. I've been to Iraq, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been boots on the ground. I saw what needed to be done, and as a technologist, saw the art of the possible, figured out what the operators needed, and then went back and did it. And so when I was recruited into government, when our Director of National Intelligence stood up, and I was asked to be the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the intelligence community. And then the Director of National Security Agency and National Geospatial Intelligence Agency essentially nominated me to go do that. And they said, you're a technologist, you know the problems, now you can go fix them. And so serving as a technologist in a policy role was critical because I understood what we needed to do, change the rules by which the community played. And so that was a wonderful opportunity as well. And I got to serve in various places around the government. And at some point, amazingly, despite the tragedy of 9/11, The bureaucracies kind of grew up, people got complacent, and I thought, you know what, if we're going to save the world, it's not going to be from government, it's going to be back in industry. And I was thinking about, I want to work with a really innovative group of people, and then I decided to go to Google. And it was funny, people who only knew me as a senior executive, they went, go to Google. Wow, that must have been a real culture shock for you from government. And I said, no, going into government was a real culture shock. I said, you think it's hard to be an innovator? Try being an innovator in government. I mean, there's just so clinging to the status quo. And there's really a cycle that if you're a change agent, first they attack what you're doing, then they attack you professionally, and then they attack you personally. And I've been through that cycle more times than I can count or care to recall, but you build a thick skin and you remind yourself again is what matters. And I would tell my team, you know, because we were leading change and of course the purveyors of the status quo were threatened by this, is I said, remember, they're threatening you with your job or they're threatening you with words, and it's not threatening your life. And again, you are representing people who are in harm's way, counting on you to be their voice for what they need. And so attributes really what I would say is, you know, I love the quote, whatever women do, they must do twice as well to be thought half as good. And then the quote of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire is Ginger did everything that Fred did, but backwards and in high heels. So you have to combat the stereotype. How many times have people tell me, you don't look like an engineer? What does an engineer look like? Did you all see the Twitter campaign? I look like an engineer. I had to be a part of that. I thought that was great. But also the opportunity is I saw the ability to see things how they could be and make them so, and not being limited by how they are today, and being decisive, you know, no paralysis through analysis. There's so many people who you have to realize, leaders who are they're worried that I don't have all the complete information. If you're a combatant commander in the middle of a war zone, you're not going to have complete information, but you realize that not making a decision is a decision in itself and it's going to impact people. And so being decisive and always being open to new data coming in and being able to adjust. And so you think about the Reagan principles of faith, family, and freedom. We need more people in technology sector who embrace those type of values. And I want to tell you a story. Speaking at CU Boulder, it was a packed room. It was so illegal by fire standards. I mean, it was people standing in the door, sitting on the floor, in the stairways. And I spoke for about an hour, took Q&A for about 30 minutes. And then at the end, there was one guy sitting there. And he comes up to me afterwards and he goes, why do you support them? And I looked at him. I said, excuse me? And he says, why do you support them? And then I started thinking, them. And I thought, oh, yeah, there was this article that came out about me being on the board of a conservative technology company. And I said, oh, do you mean the conservatives? And he said, yes. I said, because I'm a constitutional conservative. And he goes, oh, the Constitution is so outdated. And I said, oh, very far from it. I said, the wisdom of our forefathers who knew history and understood tyranny and how to protect our freedom. And if we would uphold it, we would not be experiencing the tyranny we have today. And that man just continued to bombard me with questions. And I had a thoughtful, calm answer. He finally shut down. And I thought it was cognitive dissonance. That, of course, conservatives, they're not smart. They don't know technology, don't understand this. I had spent an hour and a half building my credentials. And then he realized she's, no kidding, a conservative. She has a brain. She's got credibility. And so that was an interesting story for me. But I would just share some insights quickly with you. I see the biggest barriers to collaboration as culture. Number one is policy and technology. And technology is the easy part. In all my roles, I'm working with senior leaders is saying, if you do not get the culture right and your leadership does not model it, you will not be successful. And then make sure the policy enables the culture you want to see, and then you can bring in the technology. And I would tell you, just as someone who I've had the courage in my convictions, I've had those good days and bad days, where it seems dark, and then all of a sudden you get this opportunity to serve at a level that you never imagined, is, getting buy-in from the top is golden, but then understanding the middle management you have to convince, and what motivates them. And I was naive to think true blue, they're all for America. Some of these people aren't motivated that way. Got to figure out what motivates them and how what you are offering is going to help them succeed. And the biggest thing is trust your gut instinct. Isn't it true in life that when we ignore that still small voice, that's when you regret the most? Is realizing the political winds will change, but the truth remains the same, and you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror every night. And so that's so important. And embracing risk. I love this quote from Moneyball. The first one through the wall always gets bloody. Every time this happens, the people holding the reins go crazy. It's threatening the way they do business, their livelihood, their jobs, the way they do things. But anyone who's not using your model, they're dinosaurs. And so sometimes if you're the first with a new idea, a new way, it's going to be rough, but in time, nobody ever apologized to me, all the people who threatened me with my job, but we're all friends now, and they see that what we were promoting was what needed to be done. And be purpose-driven for true happiness, not careerism. Don't be driven by the dollars, and do not tolerate a core value mismatch with a boss or a company or an organization. You will be miserable. And have the courage to speak truth to power. And remember, networking is working. Coming to a place like this, like was said today so well, is the relationships. And I tell people, it is not the org chart that gets things done, it's the network. You find the hubs and the connectors, and those are the people who work in and around the business and get things done. And I want to leave you with one quote, Pythagoras, choices are the hinges of destiny. And so that is so important. The choices you make will chart your destiny. And the best way to predict your future is to create it, Abraham Lincoln. So the future is yours to define. Choose well, have the courage of your convictions, stand strong, and change the world.
Thank you. 3 business ladies. I have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to ask them. I'm going to let you ask them. So if you raise your hand, we have the mics here. Here, well,